Desmond Tutu was a South African Anglican bishop and theologian, known for his work as an anti-apartheid and human rights activist. He was Bishop of Johannesburg from 1985 to 1986 and then Archbishop of Cape Town from 1986 to 1996, in both cases being the first black African to hold the position. Theologically, he sought to fuse ideas from black theology with African theology. Tutu was born of mixed Xhosa and Moswana heritage to a poor family in Klerksdorp, South Africa. Entering adulthood, he trained as a teacher and married Nomalitso Tutu, with whom he had several children. In 1960, he was ordained as an Anglican priest and in 1962 moved to the United Kingdom to study theology at King's College London. In 1966 he returned to Southern Africa, teaching at the Federal Theological Seminary and then the University of Botswana, Lesotho, and Swaziland. In 1972, he became the Theological Education Fund's Director for Africa, a position based in London but necessitating regular tours of the African continent. Back in Southern Africa in 1975, he served first as Dean of St. Mary's Cathedral in Johannesburg and then as Bishop of Lesotho. From 1978 to 1985 he was General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches. He emerged as one of the most prominent opponents of South Africa's apartheid system of racial segregation and white minority rule. Although warning the National Party government that anger at apartheid would lead to racial violence, as an activist he stressed nonviolent protest and foreign economic pressure to bring about universal suffrage. In 1985, Tutu became Bishop of Johannesburg and in 1986 the Archbishop of Cape Town, the most senior position in Southern Africa's Anglican hierarchy. In this position, he emphasized a consensus-building model of leadership and oversaw the introduction of female priests. Also in 1986, he became president of the All Africa Conference of Churches, resulting in further tours of the continent. After President F.W. de Klerk released the anti-apartheid activist Nelson Mandela from prison in 1990 and the pair led negotiations to end apartheid and introduce multiracial democracy, Tutu assisted as a mediator between rival black factions. After the 1994 general election resulted in a coalition government headed by Mandela, the latter selected Tutu to chair the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to investigate past human rights abuses committed by both pro- and anti-apartheid groups. Following apartheid's fall, Tutu campaigned for gay rights and spoke out on a wide range of subjects, among them his criticism of South African Presidents Thabo Mbeki and Jacob Zuma, his opposition to the Iraq War, and describing Israel's treatment of Palestinians as apartheid. In 2010, he retired from public life, but continued to speak out on numerous topics and events. As Tutu rose to prominence in the 1970s, different socio-economic groups and political classes held a wide range of views about him, from critical to admiring. He was popular among South Africa's black majority and was internationally praised for his work involving anti-apartheid activism, for which he won the Nobel Peace Prize and other international awards. He also compiled several books of his speeches and sermons. To every beginning, there is an end, and so is the life of Archbishop Desmond Tutu. For the sake of this piece, Africa News takes you on a journey of the life of the man who has made a global mark as the anti-apartheid hero and an advocate for equal human rights. 1931, Desmond Mbilo Tutu was born on October 7, 1931 in Klerksdorp, South Africa, about 170 kilometers west of Johannesburg. Tutu was born of Xhosa and Tswana parents and was educated in South African mission. His mother, Alitha, was a domestic worker. His father, Zachariah, taught at a Methodist school. The young Desmond was baptized a Methodist. 1943, Tutu and his entire family later joined the Anglican Church. When he was 12 the family moved to Johannesburg. 1947, Desmond Tutu was diagnosed and hospitalized with tuberculosis. After his recovery, Desmond befriended a white priest, Rev. Trevor Huddleston, and served in his church. He had aspirations of becoming a doctor after recovery, but that dream could not materialize since his parents could not afford the school fees. He changed plans to become a teacher, studying at the Pretoria Bantu Normal College, where he earned a bachelor's degree from the University of South Africa. 1948, the White National Party launched apartheid in the run-up to 1948 national elections. It won popular support among white voters who wanted to maintain their dominance over the black majority. 1955, Tutu married Nomalitso Leashenkane. She survived him a son, Trevor Tamsinksa Tutu, and 3 daughters, Teresa Thandeka Tutu, Naomi Nantumbai Tutu and Vo Tutu van Firth, as well as 7 grandchildren. 1958, he taught high school for 3 years but resigned to protest the Bantu Education Act, which lowered education standards for black students. He then joined the priesthood. 1960, Tutu was ordained and served as a bishop of Lesotho between 1976 and 1978. He then became assistant bishop of Johannesburg and rector of a parish in Soweto. 1962, Tutu moved to Britain to study theology at King's College London, where he earned a Bachelor of Divinity degree and later became a Fellow. 1966, Tutu went back to South Africa to start teaching theology at a seminary in the Eastern Cape. He also began making his views against apartheid known. 1972 to 1975, he served as Associate Director of the Theological Education Fund, traveling widely in Asia and Africa and administering scholarships for the World Council of Churches. 1975, Tutu was appointed the first black Anglican Dean of St. Mary's Cathedral in Johannesburg, South Africa, and consecrated Bishop of Lesotho the next year. 1978, he became the first black General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches, and began to establish the organization as a major force in the movement against apartheid. 1980, Tutu led a delegation of church leaders to meet Prime Minister P.W. Botha, advising him to end apartheid. Though the meeting did not yield any positive results, it left a mark in the book of history as the time is a black leader confronts a senior white government official. 1984, the anti-apartheid icon was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts to bring about the end of white minority rule. His voice was a powerful force for nonviolence in the anti-apartheid movement. 1985, Tutu became the first black bishop of Johannesburg. He publicly endorsed an economic boycott of South Africa and civil disobedience as a way to dismantle apartheid. 1986, Tutu becomes the first black person appointed Bishop of Cape Town and head of the Anglican Church of the province of Southern Africa. 1991, apartheid laws and racist restrictions were repealed and power-sharing talks started between the state and 16 anti-apartheid groups. 1994, after Mandela swings to power at the helm of the ANC in the country's first democratic elections, Tutu coins the term Rainbow Nation to describe the coming together of various races in post-apartheid South Africa. 1994, Mandela appointed Tutu to chair the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was being set up to deal with what happened under apartheid by investigating human rights violations, offering support to victims, and scrutinizing applications for amnesty from perpetrators of past violations. 1996, Tutu retired from the church to focus solely on the commission. He continues his activism, advocating for equality and reconciliation, and is later named Archbishop Emeritus. 1997, he was first diagnosed with prostate cancer and was hospitalized several times in the years since, amid recurring fears that the disease had spread. 2004, the Archbishop accused President Thabo Mbeki, Mr. Mandela's successor, of pursuing policies that enriched a tiny elite while many, too many, of our people live in grueling, demeaning, dehumanizing poverty. 2011, the Dalai Lama inaugurates the annual Desmond Tutu International Peace Lecture but does so via satellite link after the South African government denies the Tibetan spiritual leader a visa to attend. 2013, Tutu makes outspoken comments about the ANC. He says he will no longer vote for the party because it had done a bad job addressing inequality, violence, and corruption. 2013, referred to by many as the moral compass, Tutu declared his support for gay rights, saying he would not worship a god who is homophobic. 2021, he died in Cape Town at age 90. On December 26, the world lost a moral compass, Archbishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa, aged 90. Grounded in his Christian faith, his legacy as a peace builder through his anti-apartheid activism and promotion of peace and justice is unparalleled. Tutu's great influence on the field of peace building, and his mark on peace and reconciliation efforts have rippled worldwide. Here are 4 attributes that Archbishop Tutu exemplified as a religious peace builder, radically inspiring people across the globe to fight injustice and advocate for peace. Tutu is an exemplar of faith-based peace building. Inspired by Christian moral teaching, he used his platform as a religious leader to fight for social justice by advocating for reconciliation and forgiveness. As South African President Cyril Ramaphosa reflected, Tutu was a leader of principle and pragmatism who gave meaning to the biblical insight that faith without works is dead. As chairman of South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission in the 1990s, Tutu sought to apply the principle of restorative justice, in contrast to retributive justice that he believed would not achieve lasting peace in a post-apartheid South Africa. His credibility as a religious leader and public moral figure was critical to the Commission's efforts. Archbishop Tutu also led the effort to ordain women in leadership in South Africa's Anglican Church, promoting gender-inclusive leadership. His leadership on gender inclusion did not stop with the Church. He called for including religious women in dialogues and the anti-apartheid movement and was an adamant supporter of LGBTQ+ rights. Tutu used his platform to advocate against injustice beyond South Africa's borders, calling out human rights violations and actively advocating for rights for all and nonviolent means by which to achieve them. When there is injustice, invariably peace becomes a casualty, he said at his 1984 Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech. In a 2004 op-ed, he said, "For our nation to heal and become a more humane place, we had to embrace our enemies as well as our friends. The same is true the world over. True enduring peace between countries, within a country, within a community, within a family requires real reconciliation between former enemies and even between loved ones who have struggled with one another." He mobilized religious leaders and institutions and influenced world leaders to pressure the apartheid government to abolish racist policies and practices. He continued to be a moral authority within South Africa as Nelson Mandela's African National Congress assumed power, informing leadership while unabashedly calling out missteps and continuing to serve as a religious leader engaging with the community. As a staunch advocate of nonviolence, Tutu courageously and notoriously stepped in, using his authority as a religious leader to prevent violent situations from escalating, including atrocities carried out in the name of apartheid. Yet he went beyond a surface-level reduction of tension and violence to proactively realize that deeper grievances needed to be addressed in order for a divided nation to heal. As Archbishop of Canterbury Justin Welby wrote in a recent tribute, Tutu's vision and bravery were allied with a canny political sense and wisdom, enabling him to be a healer and an apostle of peace while so many still saw wounds and war. His principles of forgiveness provide models for peace processes and reconciliation across contexts. He was a vocal supporter of the peace processes in Northern Ireland and Israel and the Palestinian territories, for example, and raised awareness of other global injustices from the persecution of Rohingya to advocating for LGBTQ+ rights. A Christian leader of the Anglican tradition, Tutu was a friend to many within and outside of his own denomination. Most famous, perhaps, is his friendship with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, with whom he would share a stage and laughs and together promote human rights and justice. At home in Cape Town, he was also known to convene interfaith services with Muslims, Jews, and members of other Christian denominations, encouraging cohesion among people of all faiths. He started a popular peace lecture series in 1985 featuring religious leaders speaking about peace from their religious traditions, including Maulana Farid Isak, Rabbi Julia Neuberger, Somugal Satgar, South African Hindu Mahasubha, and Ella Gandhi, the granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhi. His legacy inspires the work of peace builders everywhere, including at USIP, and in the work that we do to support the courageous efforts of religious actors to prevent and resolve violent conflict with inclusion and gender sensitivity. As Tutu wrote, confession, forgiveness, and reconciliation in the lives of nations are not just airy-fairy religious and spiritual things, nebulous and unrealistic. They are the stuff of practical politics. Desmond Tutu was a spiritual and moral giant, bravely stepping forward to create a lasting pathway for peace. He sought reconciliation when others wanted retribution. He sought healing when others wanted revenge. The world is a better place because of his leadership and example. His call for all to engage in the practice of peace is one that continues to inspire. Let us work to be peacemakers, those given a wonderful share in our Lord's ministry of reconciliation, he said during his Nobel Prize acceptance speech. If we want peace, so we have been told, let us work for justice. Let us beat our swords into plowshares. Thank you for watching this video.